Right, I know it's Sunday and I do not normally post 2 videos in the space of a week, but I wanted to spend a little bit of time breaking down some of the price action that I'm seeing over the weekend and why I think we are seeing some early cracks in this cryptocurrency rally. I will fly through a few charts on the lower time frame and then just remind everybody what the bigger picture looks like. So as you all know, I have for some time been long cryptocurrencies as a short-term counter-trend rally. You guys know, if you followed me for a while, that I'm expecting BTC and crypto to completely collapse over the next couple of years. I think we're going to see a move down that is going to catch many people off guard and will leave most people fearing that cryptocurrencies are completely dead and we're a total bubble. And I can even see Bitcoin going as low as $3,000 to $5,000. But in the short term, when we broke out here back in mid-April, I said that this downtrend break, along with the potential for a continued sort of short-term bounce in equity markets, meant that I thought cryptocurrencies were good for a long, and I went long down here. I'm up significantly, but yesterday evening I closed my longs and I flipped short on altcoins, and I want to explain why. First of all, in order to do that, let me just bring up the Netflix chart, which is something that I've been using as a bit of a proxy for overall market health. And I've talked about this being the right shoulder, the complacency shoulder on the indexes, and many people will be led back into believing that markets are turning bullish on this bounce. Netflix is one of the few that has made a new high and has come right into this zone that I've been looking at for a top for many years, almost 3 years now, going all the way back to the spring summer of 2022. And so when I see Netflix nearing a top and I look back at what that meant in late 2021 when Netflix topped just at the moment that Bitcoin peaked, I think there is a good chance that we will see something similar here, that Bitcoin, this short-term rally on Bitcoin, tops out just as tech stocks begin to roll over. And you all know that if you look at some of the other tech stocks, if you look at the FANG group, Amazon, the Mag 7, there is absolutely reason to believe, in my view, that bullish structure has been broken. And I've touched on indexes in previous videos. I think the Nasdaq is heading much lower. I think we're going to see a crash of about 75% over the next 2 to 2.5 years. So my bigger picture is bearish, and the fact that we've just tapped this massive downtrend this massive trend line that has capped price for 7 years now, I think there's reason to believe that, given how closely Bitcoin and Netflix were correlated at the last top, that Bitcoin is on borrowed time. And I've always said the rally for Bitcoin will be short-lived. I still believe that to be the case. And I believe the window for Bitcoin to move up is narrowing significantly. And so when I look back at this chart, we've fallen short. I had two main targets for this trade up. The first was I wanted to see a sweep of this liquidity at about 100k. And the second was that if we did sustain the rally, and being totally transparent, I have believed up until yesterday that we would sustain and we would come all the way into this region and test this major trend line that again has capped price for the last 4 years. But what I'm seeing on the lower time frames leads me to believe that both of those targets might be missed. We are just shy of the first target, and look, I went pretty heavy on leverage here, so I'm up significantly. And if there's one thing that I've learned over my short and quite painful trading journey at times, is that when you're in profit, you bank some of it, because you never know what's going to happen. And particularly given that I was always seeing this as a counter trend rally, I'm inclined to be even more cautious than I normally would. So I've taken profit, and I will again be looking for short entries, and I've already grabbed one of those, which I can talk to in a second. So look, why have things changed? Well, look, the Netflix chart And I think the rally in tech stocks coming to a close over the next few days is one reason. On the lower time frames on BTC, this chart's maybe a bit cleaner. I think we're at last chance saloon. If we start to break into this zone, at the moment this looks like a reasonably healthy support and resistance flip, and so maybe I'm out slightly prematurely, but if price begins to trade back under this level here, then I think that is a really solid short. So that's a terrible way of drawing a line. That is a really nice short into these lows here. And I think given the lack of strength, the lack of reaction that we've seen in the Bitcoin market over the weekend, I think there's a good chance that this does happen over the next couple of days. Now look, it's early for Bitcoin, right? We haven't seen anything really other than a retest of the previous highs. And you might argue, well, look, you're in panic mode. You don't need to get out so prematurely. But there are other reasons that lead me to believe, other factors that lead me to believe that some of that price action is going to materialize. And one of those is this chart that I've been posting for a few weeks now, which shows that this long-term downtrend that's been capping price on stablecoin dominance, so this is USDT dominance plus USDC dominance, so the two primary stablecoins in the cryptocurrency space. When this goes up, stablecoins are dominant, and often that coincides with a major move down for Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, the risk on assets in the crypto ecosystem. And to me, this is starting to look like a pretty convincing retest of this downtrend break. So we've broken to the upside. Yes, this lower time frame uptrend has been broken, but I think what I'm seeing here leads me to believe that we could get a push back up. And if this one breaks, that's the big one, then we could go much higher. So again, it's early, but I'd prefer to be out of Bitcoin longs here rather than waiting for this to potentially give way. While we're resting on support for stablecoin dominance, I think that's a red flag to me. If stablecoin dominance were to break into this, back under this trend line, I would be rethinking my position and thinking about going long on Bitcoin and alts again. But for now, I've got no reason to believe this is going to break down. The other factor that I think is really interesting is that we saw a big break in this uptrend that has supported the Bitcoin price relative to gold since December 22. Every time we've hit this line, it's led to a significant move up. And that line broke back in early March. And I said at the time that I was expecting something that would shock everyone, that gold would continue to perform well over a high enough time frame against the US dollar and other currencies, but that Bitcoin would underperform both the dollar and gold and other commodities. And so I forecast that we were about to see a massive collapse in the price of Bitcoin just as gold really hits its stride and over a high enough time frame, continues to dominate markets in the way that it has done over the last 6 months or so. So that picture hasn't changed for me. But what's interesting, if we zoom in, we are getting to a place now. We're getting to a place where we've rallied about as far as we can go without reclaiming this trend line. And one of the things that has left me questioning the forecasts for Bitcoin to revisit all-time highs, and as you know, for a few weeks now I've been saying that I think there's a chance Bitcoin potentially goes back into the 110, 115k region. But one of the things that has been holding me back on that forecast is the fact that if that were to happen, then almost certainly we would get a big reclaim of this level on the price of Bitcoin versus gold. And if we reclaim this trend line, normally, in typical market conditions, that is a really bullish sign. You've had a trend line that has held for 2 or 3 years, you've deviated it, and you go much higher. But that doesn't fit with my overall thesis. So I have been questioning, if we were to reclaim, that potentially means that not only does Bitcoin go back to 110, 115k, but potentially could go a lot higher and break some of these highs. And I don't expect that to happen. As many of you know, I've been bearish on crypto for a while now, and I do believe that in the event that equities collapse, as I suspect they will do, I don't believe Bitcoin is going to survive that. And there's no reason to believe that the trend, the tight correlation, the relationship between Bitcoin and in particular tech stocks is going to break, and Bitcoin is going to become this risk-off safe haven asset. I just don't believe that to be the case, and there's nothing in the charts that indicates that to be so. So look, I'm very convinced that equities are about to put in the kind of complacency shoulder, the first major lower high of a much longer term downtrend. I believe Bitcoin is going to follow. I've been, charting the potential for there to be some short-term upside in Bitcoin, but I think there are reasons to believe, the combination of stablecoin dominance looking strong, the fact that Bitcoin seems to have lost a little bit of momentum over the last few days and hasn't been able to hold this break above these highs, in a real kind of meaningful and powerful way. And the fact that we have rallied about as far as we can go versus the gold price without reclaiming this trend line all leave me feeling skeptical about whether this rally is going to continue. There's a couple of other things that I wanted to point out. You guys know that back here I said, look, a reclaim of these lows on Solana would lead to some upside, and I set two targets. The first one was met back on April 23rd, April 22nd. And then I said if we successfully flip this area, that would give us the green trigger, the second green trigger for a sustained move up and continuation into the 180 region. Now, this is a major red flag for me that price took out this level, and I haven't adjusted this chart for weeks, but price took out these highs here, and as I predicted, started to flip these highs into support. And here, especially when we had this deep wick below and a close above on the daily, I thought this was a really positive sign for Solana and that we were going to press on and move back into taking out these highs at about the 180 region. But what's happened over the weekend is that we've come back in to retest this zone, and to me it looks like it's starting to break down, and I think we'll have to wait for confirmation at the end of today's close. And granted, we could see a bounce back into here and it could push higher, but at the moment this doesn't look good. And if all of this turns out to be a big deviation above these highs, a swipe of this level here, then I think what that means is that we come back to retest this weekly low zone in about the 120 region. And I think if we do that, I think shortly, at some point over the next few months, I expect it's going to be lights out. And I just want to show you one other Solana chart, which is not new, but again, you guys know that I've been really struggling with the fact that this trend line, this uptrend on Solana versus gold has been so clean. Price has been supported every time we've moved into the space that this trend line occupies. And then we saw a break below back in March. And again, I thought, well, that's a really strong sign that the market's going to go lower. But since then, price looks like it's sort of just about reclaimed. And I'm starting to wonder, I thought that the reclaim would lead to a pretty significant rally if that happens, which again was why I was struggling with the idea that it had reclaimed, because that could potentially lead to significant upside. And I just don't see this being a sustained move for crypto. I see it as being a short-term bounce, and one that will eventually catch a lot of people offside in longs. And I'm starting to see reason to believe that, if you look at this support held here, we collapsed beneath the trend line, we've come back up to retest it, and then this looks a bit like a reclaim, but look at the reaction that the market has given us since. This just doesn't look particularly strong to me. Now granted, we could have a bit of a bounce over the next couple of days and then potentially reclaim this range low here, but I'm starting to see weakness, and yes, it's only on the lower time frames, but the fact that we've not been able to muster a significant rally since this small reclaim just leaves me wondering whether on a high enough time frame, whether this will just look like a back test of the trend line. You know, technically we've moved above it, but the move just looks so weak that I think if we get rejected from here and we start to trade back in this region, that will be a really big warning sign to me that the upside has tapered off and that price is going to decline really significantly. And look, I'm seeing other reasons on other altcoins, and look, Lido is just a classic example of, in my view, of another totally pointless shitcoin that is probably going to go to zero or close to it over the next couple of years as people are hit by reality. You know, people for so long have thought that they could buy altcoins cheaply and it would make them rich. And I think the market is about to catch many people off guard. And I don't place any particular emphasis on the importance of Lido because it's an utterly pointless shitcoin in my view. But just look at what's happened. You know, you've had these lows that have held consistently for such a long time. And then I said yesterday that the move back into this area and the rejection leads me to believe that we are going much lower, and that this could be a key turning point for the market. And yes, it's only Lido. You know, it's not Ethereum, it's not Bitcoin, it's not Solana, it's not one of the premium projects in the crypto space. But I'm seeing this on a few coins that we're starting to be rejected from a key SR area that is now acting as resistance. And to me, you know, I've already got loads of reasons to be bearish on crypto on the higher time frame. When I start to see that marrying up with some of the lower time frame price action, you know, is it possible that we get a bounce and come in and take out these highs before rolling back over, and this is seen as another false reclaim potentially? But I think given everything I'm seeing, the strength in stablecoins which are now finding support, I do think this is probably a sign that some of these lower cap alts are going to head a lot lower. And then one final chart that I just want to end on. This is one that I've posted a few times in the past. Probably doesn't get enough attention. Look, I think this Bitcoin versus the S&P 500 has actually been all a sort of corrective rally, which ultimately will see price collapse much lower. But what's happened is a couple of times we've had these big throwovers, but look at how clean some of the price action is. You know, the number of times that we've tapped the upper boundary as resistance, as support breaking down, and now once again we're tapping the upper boundary of this channel. We've had two big throwovers on market strength, and this to me looks like a really natural place for the price of Bitcoin to top out. And if we get back beneath this SR zone here, which has held as support and resistance for a long time, I think a move back under that would be lights out, and we are going much lower. So to me, the stars are aligned. Yeah, we could get a bit of a bounce over the next couple of days, but I'm really cautious, and I'm keen. I'll just leave you with the bigger picture. I mean, this is my view. Now, call me crazy, but I think if we do see some sort of major recession or potentially even a depression, and I think there are lots of technical signs that equities are heading that way, and you can check out some of my other videos to find out more about my view on that. But look, bigger picture, this is what I'm expecting for Bitcoin. Now, yeah, could we come back up into this region? Possibly. You know, there might be a bit more of a sustained bounce into the 110k region, but ultimately I'm expecting price to roll over and to completely destroy every bit of optimism and hope left in the cryptocurrency market into 26 and 27. And so I have to, every time I am bullish on a lower time frame, I have to temper that with the reality that in my view this is nothing more than a short-lived counter trend rally that absolutely could push a bit higher than most people would expect, especially on the bearish side, although there are not many of us. But absolutely bears could be caught offside and price could push higher. But ultimately, this is going to be short-lived, and the market is on borrowed time. And I think, shortly we will see equities begin to show weakness, and Bitcoin will not survive that. So that's the context that we're operating in my view. And so I personally am going to be really cautious, and I'm going to take profits. And I mentioned that I've already started looking for shorts. One that I hopped into yesterday was a short on BNB, which is already, I'm already in profit. And again, the reason being because when you look at the bigger picture here, this looks like some sort of massive wick-off accumulation where we've put these highs in, we've come up, we've taken them out, we've got back into the range. And my first target on this short is going to be down here at these lows. Eventually, as I've said for many weeks, I do expect price to collapse all the way back here. So I've left a decent amount of room for price to move to the upside, and I'm happy to add to collateral to protect my position. But ultimately, I'm expecting this to have an absolute shocker over the next couple of years. And so, I'm not going to use too much leverage, but I'm happy to put my foot down on this trade, particularly if I see a world in which stablecoins are holding. BNB, in my view, is going to be one of the coins that gets hit the hardest over the coming months and years into this crisis. And I see that reflected on the BNB BTC chart, where again this uptrend has held all the way back to 2021, but I don't think it's going to survive another test. And now you can see this SR level here is now acting as resistance. To me, I think this is going to get shot to pieces, and I expect that means that there's potentially some sort of crisis coming for exchanges. So again, I'm being really careful, not just with my trades, but also with the counterparty risk that I think exists in the market. If you've got significant sums of money on exchanges over the next couple of years, just be careful, because we know this market, can really catch people off guard. And sometimes that happens in a good way, and sometimes that means really negative things, like people who had cash on FTX have found out, people who had cash in Luna found out. So I do not want to be caught with my pants down when the market turns. So I'll leave you with that. Like I say, first real sign of weakness for me on Bitcoin will be a break back into this range here, where we get back under these highs, and then I'll be looking for a short into the 92k region. And if that happens, 92k is a really key line in the sand for me, because that is the zone that held as resistance and then support for such a long time that, again, we've tested it here as support. If we come back here, to me, that's just a sign of waning momentum. And I suspect while it might hold over the short term, eventually, if it gives way, anything under 92k on the daily is a really big warning sign for me that the market is heading lower. So I hope that's helpful. That's just how I'm seeing the market over the short term. Like I say, I'm out of longs now, and I'm looking for some choice shorts that I hope will give me an opportunity to swing in a big way. Right, I will leave you with that. Have a pleasant Sunday. Look forward to spending a bit of time with all of you soon. If you've got any questions, do hit me up over on X, and please do hit the subscribe and the like button if you've enjoyed any of the content, if you found it useful. Like I say, none of this is financial advice, purely for entertainment and potentially informative purposes. But, this is nothing more than just my view on the market and where we're heading. I'm not an investment professional. The clue's in the title, part-time trader. I spent a lot of time honing my craft, but I do not expect anybody to be making financial decisions off the back of any of my content. So enjoy it, take it with a pinch of salt, do with it what you will, but please do not make financial decisions off the back of my analysis. Enjoy the weekend, guys. Speak to you soon.